I wanted to share personal experience of myself growing up in a dual language home. My parents were both Spanish speakers, native Spanish speakers. And my experience growing up, I think that my parents always valued the language, the Spanish language. Um, I think along the way, as I was attending elementary school, my early years, I don't remember those experiences where my home language was celebrated a whole lot. And so I know that during the time, those early years, and then then transcending to my elementary years, middle schools, I kind of lost my home language. And I know that when I would visit my grandparents, I would feel kind of ashamed because I didn't feel like I had the strong Spanish to speak to my grandparents, and I kind of isolated myself from them because I felt like they couldn't connect with me. They weren't, I couldn't relate to them like my, cousins did, who, did speak to them. So I did. So the just reflecting on that experience, my grandfather, um, he knew that I was struggling, but he never turned me away. He always invited me to spend time with him, and he would make simple connections with me with the language. Like he would give me words as a child to, to understand, okay, this is what you're trying to say, but it's in Spanish. So that helped me growing up as a young child and having that, that acceptance and that encouragement from my grandfather. So now I use it in my professional as a teacher, as a preschool teacher, and now I'm in a dual language classroom. So I remember these experiences as a young child and understanding and reflecting that the home language is very vital to incorporate in the classroom and to accept that, celebrate, because families, parents are going to feel comfortable, if they can make that connection with your staff. And then if there's a teacher that may not know the language, the first language, there's someone else that may provide support, that language support. It could be an assistant or a co-teacher, but utilizing my personal experience and now as a professional, I know the first language is definitely a strong foundation for those early years to maintain that first language, because it's going to just transcend into their future to have greater academic success, cognitively, social emotionally, and they're going to keep that language which they can relate to at home, with their parents, with the extended family members. Like for my situation, my grandparents who only spoke Spanish, and the children now, if they don't keep their first language, they're going to lose it, and they won't be able to make those connections with their extended family members, and then maybe down the way, expose their own children to the language. And it's cultural, just bringing that language in, bringing the culture into the classroom, making those connections with family and school, and it just expands to where the children are just learning, they're keeping or maintaining their home language, and then also developing that second language, which would be English for some, and some of them a different language, may have a different first home language, but just definitely doing our best as professionals, and myself making sure that welcoming the families, using print in their language in their classroom, providing materials that are in their language, through literature, through messages sent in their language, to make that connection, and all in all, just to make sure that they know that they're accepted, they're respected, and we value our partnership together. So that's why I feel like home language is definitely something that we, as early childhood providers, very important that we value this and celebrate in our classrooms every day. And if you want to share, you can share your experiences too.
I always thought, supporting home language, would bring a lot of how do I phrase it? I always believe language can bring so much comfort, it can
Yes.
really bring so much, of their home life to school. And I, I had this experience when I first started, in this field, like about 10 years ago. I had a little girl who would have such a hard time, during the day, we would have a hard time, getting her engaged with activities, getting comfortable with us. And, and one day I heard her, and she wouldn't talk, she was like, nope. And one day I heard her leave. Her mom had come to pick her up. And I heard the mom talk to her in Spanish. And let me tell you, that girl could talk. And from that point on, the next day I made it a point to say, I'm going to talk to her in Spanish, because none of us ever tried. No one knew that, at home they mainly spoke Spanish. So everybody was trying to talk to her in English. And she was like, I don't know what you're trying to tell me. And the next day I made it a point to talk to her in Spanish. And I still remember like me saying something in Spanish and her eyes just like opening up, like I know what you're trying to tell me, and from that moment on, me and her were like this, she was because she just felt so comfortable. She finally found someone who she recognized the language that they were talking. And from that experience, like it really, started that concept of like how much language can bring so much comfort to a child. And then even starting this, project and really solidifying how important it could be to really build those relationships, to really build that sense of home at school.
Yes.
And from that experience 10 years ago, like that's always stuck with me. So whenever I have a child who I had a child who spoke Hmong at home. And I asked one of my coworkers to help me learn small key words to try and have that sense of comfort too. Like, oh, I recognize that word, and I've always tried to make it a point to really incorporate it as much as I'm capable of, and really bringing in people who also speak it to kind of have that. Like I said, like ultimately, I always want my classroom to feel like a home. And I always want to bring in, all the languages spoken, their music that they hear, or books that I could find in, in that language, and just really try and incorporate it as much as I can. And I'm always thankful to have that experience 10 years ago, because even to now, like it's still in my heart. And I always try to kind of make sure I'm able to connect with as many of my kids that I can in any way that they may need, whether it be, English, Spanish, sign language, and any way that I could kind of continue to make those connections. So that's why I always think it's so valuable to incorporate it as much as I can.
That's great. Great example, Jeanette.
I like, Jeanette, when you described that moment when you had that connection, and I wrote down bonded, like this, similar to what Eva had with her grandfather. He brought her alongside, like you belong. And I think that's a really strong connection. And about 1.5 years ago, I was fortunate to have that experience with a new infant joining the infant room. And I noticed in some of the intake information that the father spoke Jamaican. So using the language survey, I was intrigued because, yes, we do get our Spanish speakers and even some of the Asian dialects, but I had never seen Jamaican before. And so he was a very vibrant young father, very hands-on and involved, and explained that he spoke what's called Jamaican patois, which is kind of like a street or slang version or dialect of Jamaican. And it was a great conversation. It started off with a welcome sign that our teaching assistant suggested that we make. She actually went onto Google and was, careful to find the right, format and verbiage, but she came up with the word wagwan, which
Wow.
as I came to study the language more, I realized it's roughly what's going on, wagwan. And so she
Wow,
printed
so
it on
interesting.
isn't that interesting?
Very interesting.
She printed it on a chalkboard in vibrant colors and had it outside the door. And I have the most beautiful pictures of his mom, just big smile, kneeling in front of that sign with her son.
Oh.
And it's kind of just one of those pictures that stays with you. And, we snapped a
Yeah.
bunch of pictures, and she was so excited to show her husband. And she even told me, months later, how welcoming how welcome she felt to see their native language presented that way to welcome her son. We went on to have the father actually be a resource to help us label items in the classroom, toys, and we actually had a class-made book, and we made a Spanish version and the Jamaican version. So it was really a nice way, it was a nice opportunity to involve the dad. And I don't know that we would have had that otherwise, but he had this very special skill set, and he was so approachable. And I went on to learn a few more words. One was a greeting we would use at departure, which is Licklemore, which basically means see you in a little while, see you in a little more time, Licklemore. And also some functional words like nyam, like to ask the child, was he hungry? Or you're good? Like, do you need anything, or is something wrong? So it was really a nice way to connect and, look at the whole child. This is a language
Yes.
that is actively
Good
spoken,
point.
in the home.
Mm-hmm.
And there were not a lot of resources that I knew of to support it. I actually Googled a few phrases to hear how they were pronounced, so I didn't butcher it. But I think it was very validating, and language is such a part of a child's self-identity.
Definitely.
And to accept it and embrace it. It also kind of spilled over to music. The family mentioned they enjoy playing reggae and Bob Marley, so we found a few
cute.
kid-friendly versions. The mom would come and nurse a few times a day, and sometimes she would catch, with the Bob Marley melodies on, and she said she just felt like home. So thank you for letting me share that with you.